Creating scene transitions. Now that we understand how nested compositions work in After Effects, we can start using them to create transitions and templates for our projects. As always, when working in After Effects, there are a few different ways to tackle a problem. Transitions work by masking or covering one scene with the next. You might already be able to guess which tools are useful to create scene transitions. Transitions using masks. I'll start by creating a transition using a mask. We generally try to avoid using them to create basic transitions between scenes, as they are harder to create templates from. Masks, as you've seen so far, are simple to create and use and have different parameters that make them easy to animate and control. Creating a template with them won't be very easy or fast to do, as you'll end up having to copy and paste the mask or mask transitions you have onto each layer that you want to apply them to. As you can see in this example, I have a square mask that swipes across my screen from left to right. This is the most basic and easy way to make a transition, and it looks boring mainly because my two scenes have the same background color. This makes it harder to see what has changed between the two scenes. What we can do is create two different color solids between my scenes and offset them by 5 frames. Then apply the same mask transition to my solids, and now you can see that we have a more dynamic transition between the two scenes. The problem with this is that it's harder to make changes to the transition. For example, if we need to change the shape so it is an arrow and not a square, then I'll have to go and manually update each layer in order for this to work properly. This can be a really time-consuming task if we have multiple scenes that need to be updated. So the best way to create transitions is to use track mats and pre-compositions. Transitions using track mats. After seeing how masks work for transitions, you can probably tell why track mats are superior. I'll create the same transition using masks inside a new pre-comp, but I'll apply this mask animation to a black solid instead of the scene. Now that I have it set up, I can bring my square transition comp into my timeline and use the track matte option so my solids and my scene use this value for transparency. As you can see, we get the same exact result, but now if I need to change the shape of my transition again, I just need to go into my square transition comp and make the necessary adjustments, and it will update across my project. This means that if I've used this transition over all my scenes, it will get updated instantly. This is the base principle that we will use in order to create transition templates for our projects by using track mats or pre-comps. Another way we can use these transitions is by importing them into our pre-comps and placing them as a background layer. For example, I'll import the transition into my third scene that currently has a color background and my transition composition. I'll change the color of it to match the background, and then I'll erase the background layer. If we now press play, we'll see that the animation is working correctly and is doing the same thing, but with the background. Another benefit of using pre-comps as track matte transitions is that we can add essential graphics to the mix to get even more control over the transition animations and templates. Now, instead of having to manually go into the pre-comp to change the color of the background from black to another color, I can just add that parameter as an essential graphic. Now I can easily change it whenever I need to. For example, in order to be used as a track matte transition or a background transition layer, how to make transition templates. In the following example, I'll show you how to create a transition from scratch. You should know that After Effects already has some transition effects, and you can find these inside the Effects and Presets panel under Transition. To apply them, drag and drop them onto a solid or shape layer. In my composition, I've added each of the effects to layers and named them so that I can show you a preview of how they look, so that you can have a visual reference as to how you can use them by animating their parameters. Block Dissolve creates a grid of vanishing squares. Card wipe flips a grid of squares that creates a 3D flip effect. Grid wipe creates a transition that cuts the layer into diamond shapes that get smaller over time. CC jaws bisects the layer with different shapes. CC light wipe creates a circular transition with a shiny light effect. CC line sweep creates a swipe based with a step-like transition. CC radial scale wipe. This is just a circular transition. CC twister twists the layer and scales it to a corner. Iris wipe. This is similar to radial scale, but with polygons. Linear wipe is a simple sliding screen transition. Radial wipe, a clockwise or counterclockwise radial transition. Venetian blinds, a horizontal or vertical grid line transition. All of these are quite useful to get things done quickly and efficiently, and almost all the parameters can be added as essential graphics. Sometimes we need to create our own transitions, so I'll show you a quick example of how to do one. For this transition, I'll create 3 parallel lines on a new shape layer and make a stroke thick enough so that they touch each other. Then I'll proceed to add the trim path parameter to each of them so that I'm able to control them individually. Next, I'll import the transition's composition into my main composition, and then I'll unfold my essential graphics and animate the trim paths for each line so that they stagger into the frame. If I want this to animate in at an angle, all I need to do is change the rotation parameter in my essential graphics. I can also use this as a background transition. I can also do so by changing the color in the essential graphics. To get a more interesting result, I can change the colors, duplicate it on my main timeline, and offset it slightly. As you can see, creating these transitions is super easy. Just remember that we need our track mats to have the same duration as our entire scene, otherwise something like this might happen where it breaks. Just like the icon gallery we discussed a few lessons ago, the best way to create transition galleries is to create them in a separate After Effects file, where you add or remove them as needed, and then import their file into the project where you'll be using them. Conclusion. Transitions are easy to create once we understand how we'll be using them in our project. The native Transition Effects Gallery allows us to create basic transitions quickly and easily. For further customization, there's also the option to create our own transitions from scratch. We should always remember to use essential graphics where possible, as they make creating and working with templates efficient and much easier.